Sterling Heights City Council to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Riska. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor,
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski,
Here.
Mrs. Koski,
Present.
Mr. Radke,
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt,
Present.
Mr. Yanes,
Here.
and Mrs. Yarko.
Present.
Thank you, Council. We need approval of the agenda tonight, and I would recommend with the public hearing for the budget adoption being item 6A, we do have an ordinance introduction, and we have petitioners who are here. So in the interest of their time, I would entertain a motion on the agenda that moves the public hearing from item 6 to after item 8.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve tonight's agenda with agenda item number 6 being moved to be taken up after agenda item number 8.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? With no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our agenda tonight is a report from our city manager, but before I get to that, I do want to report some sad news from the city of Sterling Heights. Recently, former city councilman Richard Zettel passed away at the age of 72. He had a diverse background as a Sterling Heights police officer, city councilman, and as an assistant Macomb County prosecutor and a lawyer in private practice. He was a true success story, and we've had a number of them on our city council. He was a St. Clair Shores native. He served in the U.S. Coast Guard from 1967 until 1971, patrolling for illegal contraband in Vietnam. Upon his return, he completed a bachelor's degree at Oakland University and then followed a family tradition of serving in law enforcement, as I said, serving as a Sterling Heights police officer from 1977 to 1986. During that time, he decided to pursue a law degree from the Detroit College of Law, passing the bar in 1984. After becoming an attorney, he practiced in private practice in Mount Clemens, and then not long after that, he was elected to the city council, where he served until 1991 when he left to accept a position with Carl Marlinga, now Judge Marlinga, in the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office. Following his role in the Prosecutor's Office, he served under Governor John Engler and Jennifer Granholm as a magistrate for the Workers' Compensation Agency. In 2007, he received a lifetime appointment to the federal level as a Medicare fraud and Medicare appeals judge within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in Irvine, California. Maintained his ties to Macomb County, serving on the board of directors for the Michigan State School of Law, National Alumni Association, and as a trustee for the Macomb County Bar Foundation. The city of Sterling Heights was fortunate to have his leadership in this community, and he will be missed. Our deepest condolences go to his family, and what an incredible resume, background, history, and life story former Councilman Zettel had. As I said, he truly will be missed. A moment of silence. Thank you again, Councilman Zettel, for your service to Sterling Heights. With that, we'll move on to first item on our agenda, which is a report from our city manager, Mark Vanderpool. Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me begin with an update on the COVID information that we have this week. First, as many have read, the state is reporting that the vaccination rate is now 50%. They say 50% initiated, which means that 50% of the residents in the state have received at least their first shot of either Moderna, Pfizer, or the Johnson & Johnson shot. So the state has come up with a new guidelines. Some of you probably have heard this, but let me just review them quickly. So if the state gets to 55% vaccinated, then in-person work can resume. Probably many are not too excited about that, but nevertheless, it is a 55% threshold. The state expects we will get there in the next week or so. When the state gets to 60%, then there'll be an increase in indoor sports capacity to 25%, an increase in conference centers, banquet facilities, and funeral homes up to 25%, an increase in exercise facility occupancy and gyms to 50%, and the curfew that's currently in place on bars and restaurants would then be relaxed. Then when the state gets to 65%, remember we're at about 50% now, the state would lift all indoor capacity limits, and limits on social gatherings at homes would be lifted as well. And then the goal is to get to 70% ultimately, and that's when the restrictions in their entirety, with a few exceptions, would be lifted. We estimate now that approximately 50,000 Sterling Heights residents have been vaccinated. We're averaging about 300 doses a day at the drive-through facility. This is mainly for second shots now of Moderna, and just under 100 a day at the senior center. We're working with businesses, some of our large businesses like Stellantis, MNP, AGS, and others to actually provide on-site vaccinations. And we'll be continuing to roll that out as time goes on to other businesses across the city. In addition to exploring walk-up options and some other ideas to make it even easier for the community to get vaccination. So I'll conclude this part of my report just by simply encouraging everyone who hasn't received a vaccination yet to please do so. It's so important that the state get to 70% and that businesses can get back to normal. It's so critical for our local economy, not to mention public safety. And speaking of the COVID-19 struggles, we've been lucky to develop what we believe is going to be just a really exciting full season of activities. And I want to take just a little bit of time to highlight some of those activities as they're coming up quickly, beginning with the Memorial Day service later this month, so on the 31st, that is. So let me draw your attention to the screen. And we've worked really hard over the last couple of months putting together this season, and I think most will be excited to know that we now have these options. And we call it the Break Free Blast, so that residents can finally get out and enjoy all these great activities and programming, not to mention our beautiful parks and all the amenities they have to offer. So let me jump into the first one, and that is the Memorial Day service that we have planned for May 31st as we pay tribute to our local veterans. The morning tribute begins with a ceremony in front of the police department and between the City Hall area. That's under construction right now, but that'll all be wrapped up in just a few weeks. Following the ceremony, the community can join us or at least view online what's called a Memorial Day cruise in honor of our local heroes. So this isn't the traditional parade, but it is a cruise that will parade around or drive around the community, and we'll publicize the route so that the community can take note just prior to, a few days prior to the actual event. So I look forward to this. Again, it's Memorial Day, just a few weeks away. And then our cultural exchange, we're really excited to announce this program. We were not able to have it last year, but it's back this year in a little different form. It's going to be outside instead of March. It'll be on June 18th. It'll be at the Farmers Market Pavilion, and it will begin at 6 p.m. And you'll recognize some of the same festivities that we've had before at the event. In addition, we're going to have different food trucks and related cuisine available instead of food actually being served and prepared on site. And all of the celebrations and dances and music and so on will also be part of the event. So again, look forward to that on June 18th at the Farmers Market Pavilion, beginning at 6 p.m. And then we're super excited to bring back Music in the Park under our Summer Thursdays program. That will coincide with the Dodge Park Farmers Market, patios and pints, and Music in the Park, of course. So that begins on June 3rd and runs through September 30th. And the time frame starts at 3 p.m. every afternoon until 8 p.m. So again, we encourage you to come and enjoy the farmers market, partake in patios and pints, which is becoming more and more popular, and then of course the concert for that evening. Continuing on, we have National Night Out. That's on August 3rd. Many of you have been to this. It's become a very popular event, and you can see and interact with all of our public safety personnel and look at all the equipment and touch and feel it. And it's really wonderful for the kids, and there's so many other groups involved with this too. It's just a wonderful event. Again, that is on August 3rd. And then, of course, our marquee event every year is Sterling Fest. Sterling Fest is normally the last weekend in July, but obviously that is not possible this year. So Sterling Fest has now morphed into Oktoberfest, at least for this year. And we will have the same acts that we had planned on showing you last year, and that is Foreigner and Plain White Tees. And the acts will be on October 8th and the 9th. So we look forward to seeing everyone there. Right now, we're under a restriction in terms of the number of people who can attend, but we certainly expect by October, especially if we get to 70%, that we may not have any limitation on the crowd size. So again, look forward to Oktoberfest, our first one ever, and that's on October 9th, 8th and 9th, and you will be able to see Plain White Tees and Foreigner. And in addition to those acts, of course, we're going to have the pavilion open for entertainment, the Suds and Sounds pavilion, and also we'll have a variety of food trucks available as part of the event. And then continuing on, hard to believe, we'll be in the fall quickly, and that will be Sterling Frights. That will be October 23rd. This will be expanded some to include some children events that we haven't had in the past, in large part because some of those activities will not be available at Oktoberfest. So we're trying to shift some of the activities around with these various events so there's something for everyone. And then, of course, Sterling Christmas, that will be December 4th, and we look forward to a return to a normal Sterling Christmas in December. And then, not to mention all of our outdoor amenities. You know, our parks are open. You can see Dodge Park on a weekend is really just jam-packed. But the Clinton River is now open for canoeing and kayaking. Of course, our skate park. We're hoping our splash pad will be able to open this summer, and the soccer fields are open, the bike hike trails and ice rink and so on. So there's so many great amenities that have been newly constructed over the past few years, and residents can take advantage of over the spring, summer, and fall months, not to mention winter. So that is it for what we call our break-free blast. We hope that you all take advantage of these activities and festivities, and if you want more information, please visit our website for much greater detail. And I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to highlight the nature trail that has now been completed, and thousands of people are enjoying it, and it connects Delia Park to the northwest area of our community up by Troy Beaumont. And I'll talk about another connection from there shortly. But just to show you the path now that it's entirely done, including the respite areas. It's approximately 2 miles long. There's a bicycle repair apparatus that's included on the system. There's benches along the way, and just a beautiful route through an absolutely gorgeous nature area. And most of the trail system is kind of a fine gravel. It's not pavement, so it's excellent for biking and hiking and walking, and blends in nicely with the environment. And you can see here we had to cross a number of creeks and waterways, and in total there's 4 bridges that were constructed, and they too blend in very nicely with the natural environment. On the left is one that is under construction, which is now complete. There's a couple of areas that are concrete, but they're only leading up to roadways. Again, most of the trailway system looks like the trail on the left here. And what we're able to do is work with the residents along the trailway system and make sure that we provided ample buffering, as you can see here on the left, and some of the pine trees that were established to screen the path to some of the specific homes in that area. So just going back, I wanted to highlight this because, again, it's another one of our recreating recreation amenities. The only last item to be completed is the bocce ball court, and just behind the senior center, and that will be done this construction season. So you can look forward to that final amenity being completed. And now I wanted to shift gears just a little bit and talk about an item on the consent agenda tonight involving our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. So let me again draw your attention to the screen. And I want to talk a little bit about what diversity means for the community and the significant successes we've enjoyed in that area over the years. First, let me highlight our Visioning 2030 statement, and it reads as follows: a vibrant, inclusive, and I emphasize inclusive, community for residents, businesses that is safe, active, progressive, and distinctive. When I showed you all the slides of recreating recreation, these are the amenities that are making Sterling Heights distinctive. In addition now to many other projects that we undertake, including road projects that have significant aesthetic improvements and so on. Sterling Heights, a bold vision for an exceptional quality of life. When you walk out tonight and see the entire campus area just jam-packed with cars and people across the street, even on a sort of a cloudy, rainy night, enjoying these new amenities and enjoying a good quality of life, that's important. And what also contributes to quality of life is a focus in championing our cultural, racial, religious diversity across the community. When we look at our census data, this is 10 years old. We're very soon going to have new data. It's going to show a community that's far more diverse than what we saw in 2010. We expect our black population will be over 10%. Our Asian population will be increasing, and so on. We'll have those numbers very soon, certainly by year end. What's really interesting when we speak about diversity in Sterling Heights is that our local foreign-born population, now this too is 6 years old, so the number is much higher. I would estimate approaching 30% of our residents are foreign-born residents, which speaks volumes to the diversity that we enjoy in the city. Sterling Heights was one of the very first communities in the county to become a welcoming city under the state's welcoming program. Now there are many other communities that have joined the cause, but we're very proud to have been one of the very first. And what the Welcoming Cities and Counties program does is support locally driven efforts to create more welcoming, immigrant-friendly environments, and again, supporting and championing diversity, which makes our community so rich. We engage with U.S.-born and foreign-born residents in creating an atmosphere that is inclusive and, again, welcoming. It's all centered on welcoming and collaboration with all different types of groups that are moving to the area from around the world, frankly. And right here in our own organization, we have a very diverse group, the Ethnic Advisory Committee, that helps champion the cause of diversity and inclusiveness and equity, and all that they do, and they do so much. And here's a picture of the members of that group. You may recall, it seems so long ago, but just before COVID struck, back in 2019, we had a great event where we welcomed individuals to our Velocity Center of all different backgrounds to talk about all that Sterling Heights has to offer, and is very well attended. And I think that a very diverse group appreciated the community forum. Of course, many of you have attended our naturalization ceremony that we've had. It's become an annual tradition now. Of course, it's been postponed because of the COVID restrictions, but this is something that you can see the individuals just from this picture are so happy and proud to be a part of this ceremony. And it's held right here in Sterling Heights. And once again, it's just a great reflection of how the city comes together to support and welcome diversity in the name of inclusivity. And I mentioned our cultural exchange program. That has become so widely successful. We had to move it from the old venue it was at. It's almost become, when we held it was the first activity in this building. This room was jam-packed. The lobby was jam-packed. Thousands of residents enjoy the cultural exchange program now every year. We have our Diversity Awards dinner that certainly celebrates those that champion diversity, and we've had many of those events over the years, and it's been incredibly successful. The mayor and city council have created community groups to further the cause of being a welcoming community. Not only do we have the Ethnic Advisory Committee, but we now have the Community Alliance, which has now met for the first time. We have the Clergy Forum that represents our very diverse houses of worship all across the community. And we also now have the African American Coalition, which was started last year and continues to meet monthly now. So these efforts must continue, and the city must continue to lead by example. You can see that diversity just pays huge dividends to the community, not only to support and grow our local economy, but just to create a more enriching experience in Sterling Heights and a higher quality of life. And so what we're doing with the item that's on the consent agenda tonight is creating the organization, the city as an organization, as a municipality, our very first diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan. For our city our size, with all the good work going on in the community, it's important that our organization and our 600 plus employees have a DE&I plan that we can work off of forevermore. This is not a plan that sits on the shelf. It's a plan that has to become a living document and actuated forevermore. It's a best practice to continue fostering an inclusive work environment to address the needs of an ever-growing workforce. Our city workforce has become very diverse over the years. We have Muslims that work for the city. We have Chaldeans that work for the city. We have Asians, blacks, whites, and so on. It's become a very diverse workforce. And we have to continue to nurture that and grow the workforce in the name of talent retention, keeping our outstanding employees that work for us, and also being able to attract new talent to the organization as needed. So the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan will be centered on reviewing all of our existing policies and procedures to see where we need to make updates and where we need to develop new procedures and policies, making sure that our organization is ready for some of the change that comes along with a growing diverse workforce. Conducting a cultural competency assessment to determine our strengths and weaknesses and to build on our strengths and address our weaknesses. Developing the diversity and inclusion strategy, the communications plan that's an outgrowth of that, and then the implementation plan that's needed, and then also the accountability plan, a plan that makes sure that we implement these best practices forevermore. So we've gone through a very comprehensive process in selecting a consultant that's going to guide us through this effort. On the agenda tonight is a recommendation to hire Life's Journey Training and Consulting. The lead person involved with this consulting group is the executive director of the Michigan Diversity Council. And that is a group that prepares these DEI plans for organizations across the state, not only public organizations like a city or a municipality, but also private organizations, everything from auto manufacturers to hospitals and the like. The firm that we're recommending not only has extensive experience in this field, but they also have an individual that works for them that is the chief of public safety in the city of Kalamazoo. And some of you may know that Kalamazoo has public safety, which means that includes both police and fire. So we believe that this individual will be very advantageous to the process, knowing that DE&I is critically important, and not only for all departments in our organization, but especially in the police and fire department. The contract that's before the City Council tonight is for $64,000. That will be to complete phases 1 and 2, which basically encapsulates the steps that I mentioned on the prior slide. We expect that this will take us about a year to complete. And then once we have the plan complete, we'll continue to build on that, as I mentioned, forevermore. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to highlight this important process and conclude by once again recognizing our Visioning 2030 statement, in which inclusivity is obviously the guiding light. Thank you for allowing me to indulge you on that. And let me just conclude with this last item. At the conclusion of tonight's agenda, I'm requesting that the City Council convene a closed session pursuant to Section 8E of the Open Meetings Act for council to consult with the city attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with Macomb County Circuit Court case number 2021-0757-AA. And Mayor, that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanderpool. As we amended the agenda from what was originally proposed, the next item on our agenda will be an ordinance introduction, and this is to consider introduction of a tax exemption ordinance providing for payment of service charges in lieu of real property taxes for the Van Dyke Apartments residential housing located at 43700 Van Dyke and 43750 Van Dyke. We have a presentation from our city planner, Chris McLeod. Mr. McLeod. Yeah, it doesn't sound like the microphone is working.
He's gonna swap it.
About now, better?
That's better.
Okay, that works.
Would you like me to start over or just go
No,
from where I was?
we got it.
So in terms of the actual planning portion of the project, as most of you are aware, this is a project that's been ongoing since basically 2016. It's a 4-story mixed-use building with 135 residential units and about 9,000 square feet of retail along the frontage of the property, or along the first floor of the property on the frontage of Van Dyke. As you can see here, it's pulled up way to the road, and this is basically mimicking the style of development that we're looking forward into the Corridor Improvement Authority, which this project sits, that has been in place since 2008, the Corridor Improvement Authority has. And this will be pretty much the gold standard of what we're looking for in that particular area of the city. This shows an overall site plan of the area itself. Van Dyke to the far left-hand side of the screen. Clinton River, if you went further to the east or to the right-hand portion of the screen, would be off to the side there. So the blue portion of the property is essentially the developed portion of the property. The arrow type building, the angular building there, is the two wings of the Chaldean Foundation building itself. Parking sits behind it, again, building pushed all the way up to the roadway, right up to the sidewalk. And then ultimately, stormwater facility as it then transitions into what may ultimately become a donation piece for the property to be transferred potentially to the city as part of the overall project. The landscape plan here just kind of shows, again, the overall scheme of things. Again, this is a different kind of development from what we're used to, as a much more urban setting to it. Again, the building being pushed up, the frontage, you're not going to see that 35-foot of landscape greenbelt anymore, but this is the kind of development that the Corridor Improvement Authority is just coming through and finishing with our Van Dyke Master Land Use Plan that is just coming to be approved here in the next couple of months. But again, you can see the overall landscape plan here. Just an overall layout of the first floor plan, showing some of the mixture of uses. To the top portion of the screen, that wing is basically your retail wing. That's for uses to ultimately be determined. Anything that meets within our C3 district, our normal C3 district. At the corner of the building where the two wings come together, those are kind of the amenity portions of the project itself, the fitness center, community room for the residents within the building itself. And then as you go to the east or to the right-hand portion of the screen, those start the actual room units. And again, this is just the first floor. As soon as you go to 2, 3, and 4, they just simply all become residential units going upwards. This just kind of shows the detail of the actual unit itself, providing, again, this is 135 total units, somewhat evenly spread between 1 and 2 bedroom units, total of 63 one-bedroom units and 72 two-bedroom units within the facility itself. So this is essentially a one-bedroom unit, the two-bedroom unit a little bit larger, and would have that additional unit to it. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to Luke Bonner to talk about the actual payment in lieu and some of the numbers in regards to this. And then I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, Mayor Taylor, members of council, Mr. Vanderpool. As Chris mentioned, I actually was going through my electronic files for this, and the very first file I created for this project was on May 20th, 2016. So this has been quite a process to go through. The project is it's complicated in a lot of ways, but I remember meeting with Martin and the foundation for the first time when he showed this strategic plan of creating housing. And based on the design that you guys have seen here today, it was just something that we really wanted to make happen. And not only did we want to make it happen, you know, as we talked through what their vision was for where this community was located, and then the vision for what we have for the Corridor Improvement Authority, which you have seen a few times here the last few months, it really just made a lot of sense to work with the foundation to find the right location in the Corridor Improvement Authority District to provide housing that has a 0 lot line setback, so something closer to the road, something that would allow residents access to the infrastructure, to both the park and surrounding retail. But with that and with this process and the time, there have been a lot of hurdles to overcome related to the property itself. The property is located in a floodplain, it's impacted by wetlands, and it has taken quite a bit of time to go through engineering approvals with both the state of Michigan, with FEMA, and to be able to design a project that accommodates the floodplain. Mr. McLeod showed a map. On that map includes 7 acres that the foundation intends to donate to the city once they ultimately determine what they actually need for the development itself, including sidewalks, for example, the parking areas, the building footprint. So what's left over would come back to the city in terms of a donation. We would incorporate that into the city park system. And then based on the Corridor Improvement Authority plans that we've seen, it's also about activating that 7 acres and making a real meaningful connection to Van Dyke, to Riverland, into the Dodge Park system itself. So one of the other components for this project, because it is serving a population that essentially is required to have, to be about 60% of the area median income, it's an affordable housing development. Within affordable housing development, there is that requirement that residents meet that 60% income requirement, which is between $36,000 and about $40,000 a year salary, which equates to about $900 to $1,000, $1,200 a month in rent for these units. With that, there's a financing mechanism in place. There's long-term debt financing through MISHDA that's applicable for this project. There's also a 4% low-income housing tax credit with HUD that's applicable to this project. And then as we get down to our local, I guess, toolbox, if you will, for a project like this, and something that we've been used to, but it's also the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes, because as this project serves a lower income population, then the actual operating costs have to reflect those rents and the impact that that has on the overall project. So the introduction of the ordinance tonight includes a pilot payment of approximately $12,200 or 1% of net rents. And what also accompanies this is a municipal services agreement, which is approximately $20,000 or 1.63% of net rents. The $12,200 pilot payment is distributed evenly amongst taxing jurisdictions based on their proportional share of a typical property tax. And the $20,000 municipal services agreement is what comes back to the city that essentially pays for the services, the public services, police and fire that would go to service this project in the future. There's also part of the project that is not part of the pilot, and that's the ground floor commercial space that'll be on Van Dyke. The estimate there is about $18,000 in new ad valorem property taxes that will be applied to that new commercial space. That new property tax generation goes into the Corridor Improvement Authority Fund to be used for investment in other parts of the district. So with that, in concluding my portion of the presentation, I do want to introduce Martin Manna and Sam Solomon from the Chaldean Foundation. They are here to answer any other questions you have. Chris and I are also here to answer any other questions you have as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bonner. And Mr. Manna, do you want to say anything, or do you want to just be available if we have any questions? Come on up if you want to say something. Oh, okay. It's hard to tell. I can't tell. All right. If the petitioner would just like to wait for questions, that's great. And at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this item? Yes, sir. Mr. Matthews.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I took a look at this plan, and I was pleased to see that it's not simply a percentage of rent, but there's also that floor there, which I imagine would provide Director Varney with some level of stability that is probably much appreciated. I was wondering if, say, for example, the city services budget increased 10%, just throwing a number out there, if you would have a scaling slider with the percentage of rent that would go up. Right now it's 1.63%. If the services budget went up 10%, would then potentially this program go up 0.163%, 10% of what they pay? That was just one thought that I had. But I think this is an accessible program for people who cannot find affordable housing sometimes elsewhere in the city. That can occasionally be a challenge as cities grow, and especially with the housing market as it is right now. I think this would aid in our socioeconomic status diversity in the city and increase our housing sustainability for the future. And as such, I think it is a wonderful idea for a pilot. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else on this item? If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Yanez.
resolved to introduce the City of Sterling Heights tax exemption ordinance providing for payment of services or service charges in lieu of real property taxes for the Van Dyke apartment residential housing located at 43700 Van Dyke, 43720 Van Dyke, and 43750 Van Dyke.
Support. Been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mr. Yanez?
It's just, has been stated, this is a project that's been going on for a long time. A lot of thought has been put into this project. And as also mentioned, this is really sort of the, what I would say, the anchor of what's to come for North Van Dyke area redevelopment. And I'm excited about this project. I think it's going to be a good project for the city.
Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I completely agree with my colleague, Mr. Yanez. I think this is going to be the catalyst for the new North Van Dyke District. I want to thank the Chaldean Community Foundation for sticking with this through the thick and thin, because it's been on the board for a while. And I think this is going to be a wonderful, like I said, welcome to the city of Sterling Heights if you're coming down Van Dyke from the north side. And I fully support it. This is going to enable people to live here. And look how beautiful this building is. It's going to be here for a long time. So thank you, Mr. Manna. Thank you, the Chaldean Community Foundation. I highly support this project, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Mr. Manna, if I could, please. Good evening, Mr. Manna.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming and bringing us this project. It does look beautiful. It looks like just what we need for this area, but I have a couple of questions. How would residents apply for this housing opportunity?
So there's a process anytime you have any sort of financing through the Michigan State Housing Development Authority or HUD. There's an application process, and many times there's not much affordable housing, so it might even be a lottery process. But it's open for everybody.
Okay, and that's what I was going to ask. And residents, because it is being sponsored by the Chaldean Community Foundation, I did want to clarify, this is for all residents, not specifically of Chaldean descent.
Right. Our mission is very clear, just like our facility at 15 Mile and Ryan. Some 25% of the individuals that walk through our doors annually, some 45,000 people, almost 20 or 25% are non-Chaldean. This will be open for everybody.
Very good, thank you. Do you have a name for this project yet?
Not yet. Right now, it's a CCF Van Dyke development, but we're working on that.
Okay, very good. Actually, that's all I have, Mayor Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sarowski. Council, anyone else? Mrs. Zarko.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I think this is a great idea. It's something that's long overdue, and certainly after, 6 years? You're kind of excited to be here tonight. The only question I have, though, would be for Mr. McLeod or Mr. Bonner. And that would be the very last statement that was on the slide. It says we've used these pilots throughout the city and they've been successful. So residents know, could you give them examples as to where these were used throughout the city?
Mr. McLeod.
Thank you very much. Autumn Ridge was one that council I have obviously just dealt with probably 6 months ago now in terms of re-upping that. And then Theriot Terrace was one that came before you in the last year as well, yet to be built, but they are also going to be providing obviously a very nice multiple family development down in the 14 and Red Run area. So those are just two examples that have just come in the last 2 years. Obviously this is in a market where we've identified in our master plan as a need, for this entry-level kind of market rates to low to mod to entry-level to market rate kind of housing gap that we have within the city. And so this is going to be obviously the third project within the last year that has applied for this type of opportunity. So, we're trying to fill that gap. But again, those were the two that are most recently have come to mind.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Manna. First of all, this is a beautiful development. I think, the modern look is just what that area needs to start, kickstart what our future is up in that section of Van Dyke. The bottom floor, the street level floor, is set to be retail or business, or can you tell us a little bit more about the plans there?
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. The goal is to create about 9,000 square feet of retail space, and we haven't necessarily confirmed what that might be, but, we've anticipated a bakery, a restaurant, a market, those types of uses.
Okay, great. I think it's a wonderful plan. Some of my other questions have been answered already, and I certainly appreciate the donation back to the city so that we can connect our park system. It's a win-win for everyone, so best of luck to you.
Thank you. I just want to state that, we do a lot of work in several municipalities. We have a large community, also in Oakland County, and the process here working with council and the staff has just been very rewarding, and I think has been one in which we share with other municipalities. This is the way a city should be run.
Mrs. Koski?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to either Mr. Bonner or Mr. McLeod, can you clarify for the residents at home exactly what taxes will be paid by this project? I know you said there's the 20,000 and there's a certain percentage and then an amount going back to the corridor fund for improvements. Could you just clarify that briefly?
I can. Your question kept getting more and more difficult. I had to go grab my notes. So there's three aspects of this. There's the pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. That's $12,200, and that's a floor. Pursuant to the gentleman's question earlier, that would essentially increase based on income, so potentially up to 2%. That pilot payment is representative of what each taxing jurisdiction will get. So that $12,200 is essentially divided and given to each taxing jurisdiction in proportion to what their percentage tax is and our overall property tax. The second is the municipal services agreement, which is $20,000. Again, that's a floor. That comes directly to the city because we are, as a municipality, able to levy that additional fee on top of the project. And that is to support police and fire public services related to a project like that. So we would get a small portion of the pilot payment, the $20,000 for the municipal services agreement, and then the regular ad valorem property tax is estimated to be around $18,000, which applies to the commercial space, the ground floor commercial space. And that's just based on the typical 9,000 square foot white box space, no finishes to it. And we used a projection based on what the assessing department has on similar type spaces. That property tax projection goes to the Corridor Improvement Authority District.
All of that goes to the corridor improvement,
Correct.
which will pay for the roads, streets,
Would be a portion of
landscaping.
paying for the plan that you have previously seen, correct? Road improvements, streetscape, landscape.
Okay. And one other question. You mentioned that the rear portion would eventually be donated to the city. Where is the ingress and egress to that property if it gets turned into a park?
You know, I'm going to try to, here we go. There it is. Did I do that or did Mark do that? I did. Do that. I thought I was doing it, but I don't think I did. So the current site plan requires an easement through the CCF property that goes basically east-west from the front of their project to the back of the project, which then leads to that 7-acre area. What we haven't done yet and what we've been waiting for is we're waiting for the rest of the Van Dyke master plan to be finished before we sort of plan out the rest of this project. So at a minimum, we have a connection point from Van Dyke that goes through the CCF project and connects back to the 7 acres. But from there, I think we want to connect this to other parts of the district and to the Dodge Park system.
So we'll have kind of like a canoe ferry or something heading down to Dodge Park? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You really put me on the spot with that one. I didn't know how to answer it.
I think that will make a beautiful park, and especially right there by the river, and I think it will get a lot of use. But I was concerned as to whether it'd be on the north end of the project or the south end of the project, if there's actually an easement that will be given so that we'll be able to bring people in directly from Van Dyke and not just up the river.
Yeah, the goal is to activate it. The goal is definitely to activate this parcel and not just kind of leave it back.
Okay, thank you very much. No other questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McLeod, and thank you, Mr. Bonner, for your presentations. Very well done, and it has certainly been a long process. I'm really impressed with the Chaldean Community Foundation, Mr. Manna, these plans, and how long you've stood by us. And I know not all of these delays were caused by the city. I'm not sure any of them were, but dealing with the state and dealing with the flood issues and dealing with all the different bureaucracies, you guys have always maintained, steadfastly that you were committed to this project and committed to the city of Sterling Heights. And so, on a personal level, on behalf of the residents of Sterling Heights, thank you for your patience here. It could have, you could have easily probably found somewhere else with a lot less headaches than this project. But I think that this is, as one of my colleagues said, going to be a catalyst for this district, and you are going to be sort of the first tenant there, and hopefully in a number of years we'll see this as a transformation. So, Mr. Manna, thank you for your hard work and for your kind words about our city administration and staff and the people who work hard to make sure that business owners, developers, and residents alike who need services are treated as well as they possibly can and given first-class treatment. So thank you, Mr. Manna. I'm really excited for this project and can't wait to see it. So I'm enthusiastically voting yes. And I don't have any other questions. Anything else you want to add?
No, just again, thank you. I think that the big challenge is I've become almost an engineer going through this project and understanding what a floodplain is. And, that's really been the holdup. But, thank God we're very close. I do believe this is a very crucial month with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, and God willing, we'll be breaking ground in the summer.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Manna. Council, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Good luck. Thank you. Next item on our agenda tonight is the consent agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on any item on tonight's consent agenda? Not Council. Okay, Mr. Jefferson.
Jefferson, Sterling Heights. Let's go over J. Accept a proposal for diversity, equity, and inclusion in consulting services. Mr. Vanderpool, I do not believe the city needs this. We are a pretty diverse community. We've been getting along with people. Who need this really is these 7. Because I pointed it out last week, you had 2 people sitting up there call me a racist, and the rest of them sat there and just, we had a dude, sorry, Mayor, I got to do it, hang 5 Chaldeans under the ISIS flag, and these 7 people label it a joke. So, This is not for the whole city. This is not even for the administration. This is just for them 7 people, because they the ones not getting it. The rest of us get it. We go to work every day, we work. I keep saying, Yanez, one of your people, when you was up at the state, had hung that picture, would you have your good name associated with it? Because that's what will come out in the press. State Representative Henry Yanez, associate, had posted a picture of 5 Chaldeans being hog-tied, lynched, and killed. Ms. Urowski, you work in a prominent nursing position now.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Jefferson, I've given you some leeway. If you could bring it back to this position, because you've made your grievances with Mr. Garapi and his meme that he posted on Facebook years and years ago. You've made that very well known. We all know how you feel about that. But if you could sort of tie it into this agenda item, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Tying it into the, just about what you just said right there, we just tied it in. It only in Sterling Heights. By U7, there's something like that going down. I said, Mrs. Smith, same deal. Ain't no school kid in the world gonna be able to put that picture up and say, this is what I like to do to my classmates. He be facing a high bail and a long jail sentence. So, like I said, the money shouldn't be spent on this unless these 7 are the first people to go through it. And I'd like to see the implementation of this far as Mr. Garapi goes. Like I said, only in Sterling Heights is that going down. Bye.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else on this item? This is the consent agenda. If not, council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
It's been moved and supported with no discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. This is a public hearing to adopt the 2021-2022 budget. We have a presentation from our City Finance and Budget Director, Jennifer Varney. Ms. Varney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Koszewski, and members of council. The city charter requires that a formal public hearing be held on the budget before its adoption. First, a brief overview of the budget highlights that we have discussed. The proposed budget was submitted to City Council on March 25th. Since March 26th, the budget has been available for public inspection on the city's website and at the city clerk's office. The appropriations ordinance was introduced at the April 13th City Council meeting. And now to briefly review. The proposed city budget totals $228.7 million, and the breakdown between the 5 major funds can be seen here. The total budget decreased $20.7 million or 8.3% over last year. There is decreased spending in facilities improvements, capital projects, and recreating recreation. There is increased investment in road construction, water and sewer infrastructure, and the general fund, specifically in police, technology, and human resources. The general fund increased $2.8 million or 2.5%. Cost increases were seen in personnel, primarily due to the addition of 18 total positions, including 7 police officers. There are also increases in pension contributions and health insurance premiums. As a reminder of the over 70 positions recommended in the manpower study, an additional 24 were prioritized and recommended in the proposed budget. That number has now been cut to 18. And even with these 18 positions, Sterling Heights still has the lowest number of employees per resident of all of our comparable communities. General fund decreases were seen in the transfer to the major road fund, liability insurance, grant-funded expenditures, and decreased overtime costs. 2 amendments were made and approved at the April 27th budget workshop. The first was to purchase an additional 5 power load systems for ALS transport, and the second was to eliminate the 0.25 mil property tax increase that was implemented to fund the 13 new administrative positions. 6 of the 13 proposed positions, as well as the fire cadet program and other costs, were cut to offset the property tax decrease. General fund revenues are lower than proposed expenditures by $2.1 million. A use of fund balance is proposed. This amount has not changed from the original proposed budget. And as a reminder, $700,000 of the use of fund balance is an investment in the transition to LED street lighting, which will pay for itself within 4 years through reduced utility expenditures. And we expect that we will be able to use the American Rescue Plan funding to offset the remainder. The proposed use of fund balance will reduce our general fund reserve balance to 24.5% of expenditures, still at a very healthy level. The proposed city tax rate is 16.6742, just a 2.8% increase to fund police and fire pensions, and an increase for the average resident of $3.15 per month. Our tax rate will still be one of the lowest in Macomb County cities and the lowest among Macomb County communities that have their own police department. In summary, the 21-22 proposed budget preserves the city's solid financial position, preserves the low city tax rate, preserves low water and sewer rates, includes over $15 million for road improvements, includes funding for a total of 18 positions, including 7 additional police officers and a full-time social worker, funds the LED street lighting conversion, fully funds all long-term liabilities, funds police body cameras and replaces 10 patrol vehicles, replaces multiple snowplow trucks, includes lift assist equipment for all 7 ambulances, and funds an e-gaming arena that is offset by donations. The appropriations ordinance is the legislative vehicle that allows for the expenditure of funds throughout the city. The ordinance reflects the City Council's plans for expenditures and revenues and sets the total property tax millage rate at 16.6742 to fund those expenditures. The appropriations ordinance was introduced at the April 13th City Council meeting, and the ordinance before you includes the amendments approved by City Council at the April 27th budget workshop. At this time, we respectfully request the mayor and City Council approval of the proposed budget as amended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Varney. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on the public hearing? If not, close the public hearing, and council, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yanez.
Be it ordained to adopt the annual appropriations ordinance as amended for the 2021-22 fiscal year with the following property tax millage rates: 9.4940 mils for operations, 0.9877 mils for refuse collection, 2.7240 mils for police and fire pension, 2.4157 mils for safe streets, 0.9378 mils for recreating recreation, and 0.1150 mils for public improvements, Proposal F, for a total property tax levy of 16.6742 mils.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Any discussion, Mr. Yanez?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think we went through a very healthy discussion over the last month on this budget. Certainly, anybody who watched the last meeting know we put a lot of thought, time, and effort into it. You know, there's a lot going on here with a city budget, and there's a lot of departments we still haven't recovered completely from the Great Recession in regards to manpower. The city has been getting by, but the fact of the matter is the city has done a good job with the manpower that we've had. I think this is a fair budget for a city that's growing, that's still growing. The economy's still growing. The needs of this community are still growing. And I think that this is, again, a fair budget for the citizens at this time. It does not get by me that we are coming off this pandemic and a lot of people have, suffered, been stressed. We all have, including financially, but, life keeps moving on, the city keeps moving on, and the city will be here next year and the year after that and the year after that, and we have to make sure that we maintain a high quality of life that maintains high property values, that maintains the services the people want, and I think that this budget does it. So I fully support this amendment, or this adoption.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Zarco?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I'd really like to thank Mrs. Varney and her staff for taking the amendments and certainly coming up with these new numbers for the budget. I always know that, I think about it, that this it's a guide, and it can be adjusted anytime we need to. I always look forward to December to see what's going to happen there and what we might be able to do later in the year. But certainly want to thank you and your staff for redoing a lot of this and bringing it forward. I think this is a compromise right now, and I'm certainly glad we were able to reach that compromise. So thank you for all your help. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarco. Anyone else, council?
Mayor Taylor.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Thank you. I would like to thank administration as well. I was up here last week saying sharpen your pencils and get your erasers out, and that's exactly what you did without any additional use of fund balance, and I truly appreciate it. I know, turning a freighter, mid-river isn't the easiest thing to do, but that's exactly what you guys did, and I appreciate your hard work. We were able to still fund our police officers. Putting them into the neighborhoods, it was very important to me. And as Mrs. Yarko said, I think this was a compromise on everyone's part, and I appreciate all the hard work. I think our residents will be satisfied with this, hopefully. And I know we're up here doing the best we possibly can for, the residents of the city. And I am in full support of what is in this budget. So thank you.
Council, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Radke?
Through the chair to Mrs. Varney. Mrs. Varney, even with the amount slashed from the budget, taxes are going up next year, correct?
Mrs. Varney?
Yes, that is correct, about 2.8%.
Yeah, I did the math here on my little pad. So on average, it's going to be about a $38 tax increase next year.
Yep.
So I guess I'm still confused about what happened at the last budget meeting. I feel that this budget is fundamentally dishonest. And it's nothing against what the administration was asked to do. But at the end of the day, when we take money out of our major roads fund and we cut the money we're putting into our insurance liability fund, all that is a shell game. We're not putting money that we need to put in there. And we're not putting money in there. And all that shell game is to say that we're not taking this money from the rainy day fund. But if we get sued next year and we have to pay it, we can't go to the people and say, well, there's no money in our liability fund. We can't pay this lawsuit. We'll just take it from the general fund, the rainy day fund. And that's why I have a problem with this budget. I also think it's a disservice to our employees, because for years I've worked on and campaigned on and fought for more employees. When Richard Noddy was mayor and he sat there, I remember I was in the audience one time, and he said to us, if you call City Hall, you'll get someone on the phone to answer your question, to solve your problem. We work hard for the residents. And with the Great Recession, we've gotten away from that value. We talk about how we have the fewest number of employees per resident, but really, I want to flip that on its head and say that's a disservice to the residents. We do a lot with a little here, but eventually you do less and less and less without more people. And we've cut 6 of 13 positions here, and we're still raising taxes, but we're not getting anything for the raise. I'm happy to put more police officers on the street. That's been a personal goal of mine. I want to thank administration for doing that. I fully support it. Just as an aside, I was in Dodge Park on this Sunday for a walk, and there had to be 10,000 people in the park. Every single parking spot was full, The entire grass was surrounded by people who had blankets and picnics and hammocks, and, you know, it really was a vibrant atmosphere. And showed me even more, the chief was correct when he told us that he needs 2 officers just to patrol the park. Because there were so many people there, I was frankly shocked. But at the end of the day, I think that, I'm afraid that this is a phantom tax increase. We're going to end up having to raise taxes in December after the election. I think that in all the things that we've done, we've asked the residents to pony up, but we've always showed them what they'll get for what they're paying. With Safe Streets, you're saving police and fire positions. You're getting your neighborhood streets fixed. We have a list every year that usually runs down to tell you all the streets that we're fixing with your money. In Proposal F, which happened before I was on this council, much before, we fixed and improved our fire stations. With recreating recreation, if you go to Dodge Park, like on Sunday, you will see all the tremendous improvements we've made with your money. And I think that some of the things that happened in the election last year show the residents have their confidence in us. They are telling us they like how things are going here. They know that we have their best interest at heart. And to me, I want to keep that interest and say, you know what, I would ask you, I'm not now, I guess, I don't think I'm going to win this fight. I'd ask you to pay a little bit more so we can put more employees to work for you. It's not for us. I don't gain anything by putting those employees to work, but the residents will do. They'll gain better services. You know, some of the people we cut or who are going to be cut were clerks who answer the phone about your water bills. Everyone likes to talk about their water bills, and they call the city about the water bills, and they hate being put on hold or having to be called back because there's not someone to help them. And we're cutting someone literally to answer the phone for the residents. And that to me is just the opposite of the improved services that we've set our hat on. You know, taxes are going up. We've worked so hard, and I mean, really, we've worked hard. This whole council, the administration have worked hard to really just get the meat of the issue. There's no fat here. We've shaved everything. And now I think we're going into the meat, and I just can't stand by and support that. So I will reluctantly be voting no on this budget. I am disappointed. I think that we can do so much more for the residents, and we're not doing it here today. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Mrs. Sarowski.
Oh, I was actually nodding at Mrs. Koski to go first, but that's fine.
Well, if you want Mrs. Sarowski?
Do you want to go first, or you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Mayor Taylor. Through the chair to Mrs. Varney, just to clarify some of the points that were just made, are these residents not getting anything? Well, let's go back a little bit. Why are the taxes going up at all?
Ms. Varney.
The tax increase is almost entirely related to the police and fire millage. So the police and fire millage is a floating millage that was approved by the voters as part of the charter to fund the required contribution to the police and fire plan. So it went up last year and it went up again this year. So the tax increase is to fund that contribution to the police and fire pension plan for this year and last year's increases.
Okay, so just to make sure that I've got this clear, the tax raise was actually voted on by the people to have this fund, and we have to maintain it.
Yes, it was voted on by the people as part of the approving the city charter.
Okay, and so that was primarily, you said most of the tax, of all the taxes, that's mostly what it is.
Yeah, there's some minor adjustments to the refuse millage. There's some downward adjustments to Safe Streets. Those are just minor things, but the vast majority is directly related to the contribution to the police and fire pension plan.
That the residents voted for. So that makes me feel like they at least had a say in this. So that 0.25% that we removed or requested to be removed, the mill increase, and to find a balance did occur. And there was no council increase or council-led increase in this budget. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
The 0.25 that was included to fund the new positions was removed from the budget. That is correct.
And that would have been something the residents had not specifically voted on, but we would have had to approve in order to go forward with those additional items on the budget.
Yes, it was, it's under our approved millage cap, but
Right.
it wasn't specifically voted on by the voters.
Right, we do have a cap, but we would have I understand, but I just want to make sure, yes, I hope the residents do understand, we have the ability to raise the taxes up to a cap, but do we always do it, or should we do it? That's the question. So I thank you, Ms. Varney, very much. So one other question. So just to also reiterate, it was mentioned that the residents were not getting anything for this raise that will be coming through, but that raise is actually to increase the police and fire pension fund.
Right, the tax increase is to increase our contribution to the police and fire pension fund.
Okay, so I think we've beat that one enough, and I appreciate your assistance with that. So what I'm seeing is that this really, in my opinion, I really do appreciate tremendously the hard work and the very quick work that the city administration did on finding a solution to the amendment that we asked for, to remove the 0.25 additional mills. And I see that it really has all the pieces that I wanted to see, and I believe some of my colleagues would agree with me that this was what we were hoping for, that we could do this, especially as I've said before. This is a pandemic. I see it every single day. That's what I live and breathe, is healthcare, and I see this every day with the amount of lives that are changed and challenged and will never be the same because of this. With that, I could not, in full conscience, pile on to the residents. And, it's kind of a sports term, but it's definitely where I believe they've had enough. It could have been 1 penny, but they've had enough. And I know that I've had enough in a lot of things with, this pandemic and how much we've had. So I do really, I'm happy with this budget. I am not trying to say that the citizens don't deserve the best. Of course they do. And of course, we also have a budget to maintain. We have to give them services that they need, and then services that we can afford. So thank you again. I am happy with this budget, and I am very happy to vote yes. Thank you, Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mrs. Sarowski. Mrs. Konski.
Through the chair to Ms. Barney, I think you did a great job here. The cuts that were made were not existing employees, correct?
No existing employees were cut.
Those were the employees that we had wanted to hire, correct?
Yes, the original budget included 13 new employees, again, from our manpower study, which showed a need of 70 employees. We whittled that down to 13 administrative employees. I'm just talking general fund employees right now. So of those, we cut 6 of them.
What happens in December? We do a financial adjustment. We're not going to raise any taxes at that point because I always understood that the millage was set for July, correct?
Every December we look at how revenues and expenditures are coming in. To my knowledge, we've never increased a millage in December, but I believe that legally we could theoretically, but to my knowledge, we haven't ever done that.
Well, in the 30 years that I've been here, we have never raised a millage in December. We've made adjustments depending on revenue coming in or shortfall with revenue. If there's a shortfall, then we would reduce some of our expenditures, our expected expenditures. Or if there was additional revenue coming in, then we were able to do a little more. We still have, what's it called, the 20 million? We still have that to decide what we're going to do with it, correct? Until we get the guidelines?
Yeah, the American Rescue Plan, the estimate that we have been told is 20 million. Those numbers are not final, and we do not have the guidelines from the federal government as to what we can legally do with that money. We have a broad summary, but not specific guidelines yet. The last I heard was possibly mid-May we may get those guidelines, but we definitely do not have them yet.
Well, let's just kind of guess and say, if they tell you that you can replenish shortfalls, would that possibly take care of our insurance fund shortfall? Would it possibly take care of any item that we cut out of this budget?
I would say that it's possible depending on how the federal government defines revenue shortfalls. So there is a provision in the American Rescue Plan that says you can use the money for government services to the extent that you have lost revenue. So it just depends on how they define lost revenue. That's what we're waiting for the guidelines on.
Okay, so there's still hope that we might be able to do something. I just want to compliment you. You did a great job, because I strongly feel that we do not want to or should be raising taxes at this time. I understand the workings of the pension fund. That's something that you have no control over. We have no control over. It's there. So 2.8, that's a given. The idea is that, yes, we do want to hire the additional 6 employees, but we will do that when we have the funds to pay for them. So again, thank you. You did a great job. I'm happy with the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koski. Okay, I have a number of thoughts and comments, and I'll try to move through it quickly. Just a couple things I want to respond to or clarify that Ms. Sarowski brought up. So, Ms. Varney, you indicated that the Police and Fire Retirement Fund was voted on, that millage rate goes up or down based on what the actuary says we need to contribute. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. And that was part of the charter?
Correct. Act 345 was approved as part of the charter, which authorizes this millage.
Okay, so when we say to the voters, you approved that, it would be accurate to say they approved it in 1967.
That's correct.
Okay. So that was 16 years before I was born. The voters approved something that we're now voting on. So it's a little bit to me like a cop-out to say, well, voters, you approved that. Now, I agree 100% that we don't have really much we can do about it, other than adjust pay and benefits. I mean, that's something we could do. If we adjust the multiplier, if we adjust how the pension is calculated, it'll affect what the required contribution is. So we do have control over that. We just don't have control over it right this very second. I want to be clear about one other thing, though. This budget, even with the 0.25 mils stripped out of it, includes an operational millage increase, right, Ms. Varney?
Technically, there is an operational millage increase, but it is to fund the police and fire, the offset from the police and fire pension increase from last year that we chose to offset.
Yeah, but it's an operational increase that we chose to do that last year. So we chose in the middle of a pandemic. So here's what normally happens, okay? So the police and fire pension millage can go up, all right? And what Mr. Radke was referring to, I believe, is that tax increases without an increase in service. If the cost, it's like gasoline. When gasoline goes up, it's like a tax. If you pay $3 for gasoline instead of $2 for gasoline, you're getting the exact same thing, you're just paying more. So that's what's happening here. We're raising the millage rate, if this budget goes through, by about 0.42 mils, and the services are going to stay the same. You're not going to get any benefit out of that, okay? So that's what he was talking about. What we had done in years past is, if the police and fire pension goes up, we'd reduce the operational to equalize things. That was sort of the policy of the city for a number of years. Last year, we had talked about, well, we have all these manpower shortages. What are we going to do? We can't keep cutting the operational budget when the police and fire pension budget or millage goes up. So the rubber had met the road last year, but we were in the middle of a once-in-a-century pandemic where, in June of 2020, the unemployment rate was unlike anything we'd ever seen in the country's history. So we've made a lot of progress, but those were certainly unique times. We have let's be very clear, though. The council tonight is voting to increase the operational millage by .1834 mils. In 2020, it was 9.3106, and Mr. Yanez's motion was for 9.4940, an increase of .1834 mils. So I just really am frustrated with the way that this went down on Tuesday, last week, Tuesday, and what's been proposed here, as if, you know what, we somehow found in 1 week a way to not reduce anything meaningful, hire these bodies, and not raise taxes. It's not, to me, an honest way of going about this process. Because if you look at what's being cut, they're not really cuts, they're deferments. We're deferring payment on these items until later. We're deferring the executive leadership training until next year. I mean, that's going to be back in the budget. That's going to be something we're going to continue to do. The fire cadet program is something that we've spent a lot of time talking about, a lot of energy and a lot of emphasis on as something that we need to do to recruit fire. We're having a difficult time recruiting firefighters. And so we came up with a plan to make it easier on the city to have a pipeline for firefighters, and now we're scrapping it this year. We're going to pay for it next year. Okay? It's going to be in the budget next year. We're reducing police vehicles. So we're just going to ride the police vehicles longer. Eventually, we're going to catch up and buy those police vehicles. The two big ticket items are $500,000 reduced transfer. So here's what we do. We've got a savings account with $30 million in it. We've also got savings accounts with a lower amount. And out of this other savings account, the insurance fund, we pay insurance claims because we're essentially self-insured up to $500,000. So when somebody files a lawsuit and we have to pay, we take it out of that money. Okay? That self-insurance fund has to be adequately funded. And in March, the city administration said, well, we need to put $750,000 into that fund this year for it to be adequately funded. Today, they're saying, well, we can get away with $500,000. And they probably are right. We can. You know why? Because we've got that $30 million bank account backstopping it. And it's precisely what I said at the last meeting. You don't hire these people if we're just going to be paying for them out of fund balance. So what's essentially happening is we're spending less out of fund balance in order to not put so much into our insurance fund. But what happens if that insurance fund doesn't have the adequate resources to pay the insurance claims? It comes out of the fund balance. So we're just moving money around. You know, we're shifting money from one account to the other, and we're calling it cuts. We're not. We're not cutting anything. We're deferring. We're deferring $500,000 of money that is going to be spent eventually. We're not going to just say, henceforth, we're spending $250,000 less on insurance. It's not possible. Now, we can say, well, there might be something that comes down the pipe with our major road fund. We might get funding from the federal government. They're really, this time they mean it when they say they're going to do a transportation and infrastructure budget, and we're going to get more money. Okay, that would be great, but I'm not holding my breath. And so $250,000 of road funding is not going to be transferred over to our major road fund. That's not a cut. I mean, we see the roads, you see the roads, I see the roads. We're going to do the roads. Next year, we're going to fully fund those major road funds, and we're going to catch up with the money that didn't get put into the budget this year. It's the same exact thing we're doing with the operational mill. Same exact thing. We froze the operational mill last year because we know next year we'll catch up. And that's what's happening right now. So the exact same thing is going to happen a year from now. And anybody up here who says otherwise, I respectfully don't know what you're talking about. How are we going to fund these 7 positions going forward? Are we just done, Ms. Varney, transferring that money to the road fund? You don't need to answer, because I know the answer. We're not. We're going to reinstate all the quote-unquote cuts next year. We're not going to just defer these things that we need to do. So to me, a compromise would be to say, look, we're raising your taxes by about $40. What we're doing here today is making the decision, we're not going to raise it by $60. We're comfortable raising it $40 because we say our hands are tied. $60 is too much. Well, what about 50? I mean, why hire these people? Why hire these 7 people if you don't have a way to pay for them? It's not good business to me. We have never done this in the history of my being on the city council, and it's only been 12 years, but I can't ever remember coming to a budget hearing saying we're going to hire 7 new people. We don't know how we're going to pay for them. We're going to figure it out this year, and then we'll just fly by the seat of our pants. I mean, it goes against everything we've done on this council for the 10-plus years I've been here and the 30-plus years that some of my colleagues have been here. It just smacks right up against everything we've done. And so, for what? So we can say, well, we saved you $10? As my colleague said, you know, these are important positions. These are positions where when our residents come to City Hall and they need services, this is what we're talking about. So if this is the way the council wants to go, I can't agree with it. I can't agree with it. I can't, in good conscience, vote to authorize hiring people when I know darn well we don't have a way to pay for it. There's just no plan for next year. So we shouldn't be budgeting based on, well, we'll figure it out next year.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes, Ms. Sarowski?
When you're done, may I have,
Go ahead.
may I redirect? Or, thank you.
This is not a courtroom. We're not cross-examining people. I'm telling you how I feel because, to me, it's just not an honest process. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, go ahead. If you think I missed something.
Okay, so thank you very much. So to get some answers to those questions that you're raising, could I have Ms. Varney, are you still there? I can't really see, but I think you're there. I see movement. So there were some things that Mayor Taylor mentioned that I do want to see if you can clarify. So he is saying that these 7 positions that this budget does allow for, not the 13, we cut 6, but maintain the 7. We will not have, he's stating that we will not have funds to pay for them. We're just going to fly by the seat of our pants next year. Is that actually the case? I was given information that we did have funds that would go for those going forward, that the budget would be fine without having to raise taxes in order to continue them. So can you clarify that for us?
So we funded these 7 positions by making other cuts. The other cuts, I believe, are sustainable for the next few years. Again, you know, the fire cadet program, we've been trying to get that for many years, but we also, you know, there's no mandate that we add it back to the budget. The executive leadership training, we still did leave enough in the budget to allow 2 leaders to change. To me, it's all about choices. The self-insurance fund, we're still transferring $500,000, which is the amount we have transferred for many years. We did up it to $750,000 one year. There is a $6 million balance in the self-insurance fund. The self-insurance fund includes both funding for health care and liability. We would have to reevaluate that every year based on claims. Claim activity is, you know, not always predictable. You know, do I believe we'll be okay for a few years? Yes. And the general fund transfer to major roads, Again, it's all about, we like to have a nice fund balance in there because things come up during the year that we didn't necessarily plan for. Sometimes the county has a project. Right now, I forecasted out only putting $250,000 in for the next 5 years. If we do that, we can fund all of our planned road projects, but it does not leave much extra for things that would come up. So I don't know if maybe Mr. Vanderpool wants to expand on that at all.
Thank you. I'll be happy to expand some. As Jennifer indicated, we went through this very thoroughly, very thoughtfully. In a perfect world, the budget as submitted it was our proposal, and we thought it was fully justified. At the same time, the City Council expressed their prerogative to reduce the proposed millage rate and for us to make the necessary adjustments, which we did. As Ms. Varney said, these cuts we believe are sustainable for the near future. We will have to review them every year. And it's very possible that some may have to go back up, and that will leave you with another difficult choice. Do we make other offsetting cuts elsewhere? You'll have that option, though, at that appropriate time, whether it's next year, 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. So it is all about choices. It's all about timing. We believe this is a reasonable compromise based on the direction we were provided at the last City Council meeting. But that's not to say these are not painful. These are not cuts that we desire to make, of course, or they would not have been in the proposed budget. But we think the cuts strike the right balance based on the direction we were provided.
Thank you both. I do really appreciate that because I wanted to make sure that the information that I was given was correct. So you have clarified that quite nicely. And honestly, I just wanted to say one thing because it happened to me just this year. My son's car was totaled sitting in our road. If I had to buy a new car for him now, it would cost me a certain amount of money. If I would have been lucky enough not to have to buy him a new car until next year, I would have saved a certain amount of money. So sometimes if we can make it work a year until we can actually afford it, we're saving a little bit of money. And that's my point. I'm not saying that our citizens don't deserve the services that we would love to be able to provide them, but it is just in, I feel, their best interest not to ask them to take another hit. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor Taylor, for indulging me.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not sure. Well, hold on, Mr. Radke. I'm going to finish my comments, and then we can have a second round if you'd like. I'm not sure that was clarified the way you thought it would be. I mean, what I heard was that we could make this work for the near future, that we can probably get by for a year to 3 years, and then we're going to have that difficult decision again. I mean, so, okay, fair point. We might not have to raise taxes next year. It might have to be 2023. It might be 2024. But you don't hire 7 new employees that are going to be here long term and just expect to be able to pay for them over the next 30 years by year deferring payments into funds we know we're going to need. So what I'm hearing is that Ms. Varney is essentially saying, we made very conservative estimates about what we needed to put into our insurance fund and what we needed to put into our major road fund. So we had a little cushion there that we could maybe get away with a little less. But we're going to have to look at that next year, because if we put in less this year, we're not going to have as much next year. We might have to put in more next year. And if we put in more next year, how are you going to pay for these positions? You're going to take it out of fund balance, or you're going to raise taxes, or you're going to eliminate the position. So the way I would say it is, like, if you've got a savings account in your own household with $10,000 in it, And that's just your general savings account in case something goes wrong. But on the side, you're putting away some money to buy a new car. And you've got $3,000 in there. And you see an $8,000 car that you really want. But you only got $3,000 in that account. So what do? You take the $8,000 out of your savings account. And you might be all right next year. You might be all right. You might be able to build that account back up before you need it. But you might not. And what I propose is that we stay conservative with our fund balance, with our insurance fund, with our major road fund. We got very lucky a couple of years ago with our major road fund. Because what we did is we'd go to the county and say, do this road, do this road, do this road, do this road. And the county got some extra money. And they're like, we're going to do all these projects if you can match it. And we had the money to do it, and we leveraged a few $1 million into like $15 million, or 12, I think it was $12 million in road work with $2 or $3 million of our own money. And so that $250,000 could be leveraged into $1 million or $2 million of road work that won't get done because we just pay a portion. We pay a match. You know, you might have an 80% federal funded project with 20% county and city. And so you do the math. If we only have to pay 10% of something, so it's not like we're missing out on $250,000 of road work if we don't put this in. We're missing out on $1 million or more. Okay? So that's what's at stake. And are we going to continue to do that year after year? Is our policy going to be, we're not going to put more money into that major road fund? We're going to let our roads stay in the condition they're in? No. This bill will become due. This bill will come due. It'll come due in 2022, or it'll come due in 2023. And mark my words, in December or June of next year, the budget is going to have these 7 positions that we desperately need right now. 6 positions. Are those positions going to be paid by deferring payment on things we need? No. So, I mean, that's the way that this budget is. This budget is a stopgap to get us to next year, nothing more when it comes to these 7 positions. Nothing more. I mean, yeah, sure, we could eliminate the fire cadet program. We could just say we're never going to do that. That gets you 1 job. We can say we're never going to replace, police cars at the rate we need to anymore. We're just going to do it at a lower rate. We're going to ride them harder. But should we? No. All right. Does anyone else want to speak again?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Radke.
just briefly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the budgeting process last year during the height of the pandemic. We had to extend out our process last year because the pandemic was exploding. I think that this council and this administration really worked hard to try to salvage what we could because we didn't know how much money we'd raise. I think unemployment crossed over 20% last year. And we're looking at taking in less money. We had for months and months, we had a weekly worksheet that would come to council that would tell us all the money we were spending on PPE, tens of thousands of dollars, all the overtime hours that were devoted to that, tens of thousands of dollars. It was adding up. And luckily, we got some money back from the federal government to cover those costs. But when we wrote the budget last year, we took into account that we might not get any money for that, and we started cutting left and right. So we took a budget that I thought was already very lean, and we chopped to the tune of about $5 million, including projects that I cared about. I'm sure projects my colleagues cared about. And we did that because, we wanted to be on firm financial footing. It's something that we've put a lot of pride in, firm financial footing. And anybody who's listened to these meetings for more than 5 minutes knows I care about sidewalks and I care about trees. We cut all that. Said it's done. It's gone. Because we knew we had to protect what we had. And I was proud of us for doing that. And I ate those cuts. And I don't want to eat those. I don't know anyone here who wants to say we can do that. But we did that because we had a lot of unknowns. So today I sit here and I just looked up on my phone. The unemployment rate in Michigan is 5.1%. 15 points lower than it was this time last year. And yes, the pandemic is still hurting us, but we're looking forward, at least to me, to a summer where hopefully we can get past some of these restrictions. Hopefully 70% of people get vaccinated and we can get back to normal. And one thing I know is that coming out of this pandemic, I think this economy is going to rev right up. And some of these people, like an appraiser, number 2, or appraiser 3 here at City Hall, they are directly responsive to the business community in Sterling Heights. Now, we had a wonderful project coming through here earlier from the Chaldean Community Foundation. But I expect in the next year, especially when foreclosures accelerate, once the moratorium is lifted, we're going to see more and larger projects because people are going to be going back to work. They're going to be coming to us for services. And having cut the budget to the bone last year and then chopping it even harder this year, I just don't see how it makes sense. And last year we ate a tax increase. You know, we should have floated the millage upward last year because of the police and fire pension funds being recalculated, and we didn't. We just accepted that we'd have to pay it out of our pocket, instead of having to foist a tax increase onto the voters when we knew they were hurting and everyone was hurting. So we're actually having to pay more this year, and that's part of it. You know, these cuts, next year we're going to have to pay more if we want to sustain them. The year after, I mean, what are we going to do? Are we going to have our police? We're cutting two police cars. Are we going to have our police patrol on bicycles or on foot? We could. But eventually we're going to have to purchase those vehicles. Or a Sterling Heights police officer is going to drive up to your house and his bumper is going to fall off his car because he's driven it into the ground. And, you know, we've never stood for that there. You know, we're adding lifts to the budget for the fire department. I support the lifts, though I wanted to do them over a longer period of time, but I lost that fight. But we're cutting police cars. To get lifts, we're literally cutting police cars. So everything in life has a trade-off. And this budget's trade-offs are not what I promised the voters. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else?
Mayor
Mrs.
Taylor?
Zarko.
Through the chair to Mrs. Varney. Mrs. Varney, you know, we keep saying that this tax rate of 0.25 that we decided that we were taking out of the budget. How does that affect our business owners? How does it affect the property owners, the landlords in the city?
Ms. Varney.
Can you clarify your question? I mean, obviously, you know, we calculate that the average homeowner would cost about $20. Again, that's based on a taxable value of just under $81,000, but, you know, taxes are based on value, so if your business or home is worth more than that, you would pay more. Does that answer your question?
It does. So they get the same tax bill, same tax rate, same everything that a homeowner would?
Yes.
Okay, and right now we have businesses that aren't open completely. We have some vacancies because of what's happened in the last 15 months. So it isn't when we sit here and say it's just 2.5 and it's an average of $20, maybe for the homeowner, but it certainly looks different to a business person. So that's what you know, when people criticized and still do over the big ring that's on M59, one of the things I said, it isn't just about the residents paying taxes. The business owners pay taxes as well. Property owners pay taxes. When you think of the manufacturing that we've had in the city that have been our strongest taxpayers and find out that they've been shut down for months at a time because of a disease, to me, I'm listening to this, and yes, there's a lot of things I want. Does it bother me that these positions aren't going to be filled? Yes, it bothers me. It bothers me. But I also know that I have a responsibility, and the responsibility is to do what I can for the residents of this community. And to say that we're putting it off or it's not full disclosure, I think is unfair at this time. So I'm not in favor of the 0.25, never have. Very first meeting I had, I said I wasn't in favor of it. I'm not changing my mind. And like I said, it isn't just about residents, it's about the businesses that are in this community that are still suffering as well. Nothing further.
Thank you, Ms. Zarko. Anyone else? If not, I'll make one just final comment. I don't begrudge anyone up here for voting against raising taxes by 0.25 mils. I understand that completely. I understand people are still hurting out there. I understand that there's this mentality that government just keeps taking and taking and taking, and it's never enough. I get that. And I get why, especially given what we've all been through collectively over these past 14 months, that nobody is excited about raising taxes. I get that. And I would not begrudge anyone up here for saying, I'm not going to raise these taxes. What concerns me is that we've decided not to raise the taxes, but we've decided to have the goodies anyways. And that is the problem. That's the problem. Like, we have people in Washington that spend money that we don't have. We have people in Washington that cut taxes, but then they increase spending. That doesn't work. The world just doesn't work that way. I mean, if my income doesn't go up this year, then I can't spend on a lot of new things that I want. So the tough choice to me is to say, we're either going to hire these employees and we're going to provide a dedicated funding source for them where we don't have to reduce funding to other areas that we know we're going to have to reinstate sometime in the future. We know it. We know we just know we're going to have to fund our insurance fund. We can't say going forward for the next 30 years, we're just going to put $250,000 less every year into our insurance fund. That makes no sense. We can't say we're just going to transfer $250,000 less to our major road funds every year, and that's how we're going to pay for these 7 new employees. We can do it this year. We can probably do it next year too. And if we get lucky, we can do it in 3 years. But eventually the bill is going to come due. So what I would say is, I would like to see a budget that either has funding for these positions, an honest funding source, or I would like to see a budget that does not include these positions. Because hiring people, it's not like, you know, what I'm hearing up here makes me even more against this budget. Because what I'm hearing my colleagues say is that we will never have to raise the taxes. We will never have to increase spending to pay for these positions. Well, why don't we hire 10 more? Why don't we hire 50 more and just not increase the spending? So if what I'm hearing is a commitment to never raise the taxes to pay for these positions, then I am certainly not going to go through the process of hiring these people. Can you imagine these poor people? What if they leave a job? What if they leave a good job for what they perceive as a better job? Only to find out, well, we don't know how we're going to pay for you next year. I'm not going to do it. So Mrs. Riska, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Yanez?
Yes.
Mrs. Yarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Koski?
Yes.
Mr. Radke?
No.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes.
And Mayor Taylor?
I'm a no vote. So the motion carries 5-2. Budget is adopted. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda tonight, which is communications from citizens. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on any item not on tonight's agenda? Mr. Nelson.
I wasn't going to do this during your, I couldn't affect your decision one way or the other, but, you know, you are talking about the budget, and I spent a lot of time on our debt management program, and if anybody has their budget with them, they can, it's on page 350.
You know, sir, we're under communications from citizens. And so we're going to talk about items not on the agenda tonight. So if you're going to just talk about the budget, then it's out of order.
That's the extent of that. You need to pay more attention to your debt management. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else under communications from citizens? Mr. Jefferson?
Charles Jefferson, Sterling Heights. Mr. Vanderpool, I got a couple questions for you. The first one is, I brought it up a few months ago about these house lights at night seem to be pretty bright. Looks like they're guarding Hannibal Lecter inside. What's the city ordinance on that? Is there a time frame that they got to go off so it doesn't affect other neighbors? What's the wattage or LCD wattage going out on those lights? Number two, there's been quite a bit of debate on the internet. It ain't been no debate up in here because ain't nobody showed up, but I'll ask for these bastards. It's about the chickens. I could give a care less about the chickens. As long as we do it properly, have a couple chickens, proper fencing would be 8 feet, 2 feet underground, no roosters. A proper fine for anybody with more than 8 chickens. And it should be a substantial fine for anybody with over a few chickens. I don't see why you can't get eggs when you go to the Kroger for the stuff that you can't get in the city anyway, but that's neither here or there. And then the events over the last week, Mr. Vanderpool, what's the mile per hour that we here in Sterling Heights eliminate police chases so we don't have what happened to the individual the other day? Also, I thought that the county controlled the lights so we wouldn't have that coming through, so it would stop people from accidentally, when they get a green light, going through when somebody's speeding through on a red. I thought the county would do that. And also, from where they were coming from, could we think about implementing drones throughout the city instead of police chases, controlled by the police force or command at the headquarters? Maybe something to look into, because that was, as we all know, a terrible situation. And then Mike Radke, Mayor Taylor, when did we ever denounce discrimination and hatred here in Sterling Heights against the LGBT community? When did we ever have a special resolution to denounce discrimination and hatred against the women of this community? When did we ever have a resolution to denounce hatred and discrimination against the blacks in this community? I'm asking you to, because you guys love to toss around that word racist and call people in this community racist without any proof at all. You never offer any proof. So there it is on the record, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Anyone else under communications from citizens? Yes, yes, sir. Mr. Matthews.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. According to Manager Vanderpool here, we have about 400-ish shots per day, as I understand it, getting done between the two sites, the senior center and the one up by Lakeside. That would be around 400 a week recently, or 2,800 a week, which, if you factor that in against the city's population, is pretty good. You're looking at around 2% of the population, or because it's Moderna, you could say effectively, because you need 2 vaccinations, that's 1% of full vaccinations roughly every week. And I bring this up in part because I believe this week, along with being Teacher Recognition Week, is Nurses Recognition Week. And nurses have had it not the easiest job over the past year. And a lot of people, you know, I'll see on social media, put these posts up, recognizing them with a quick thank you or confetti or something, but I think the most sincere thank you you can give is changing your behavior to make their jobs and lives easier. And following the proper protocols with the masks and whatnot, I think we've done a great job in the city. Anytime I go anywhere, people have their masks on. This is very different than when I went up north last summer, very, very different. People around here are very good about adhering to that, but from my middle schoolers that I have, you know, they are so excited to just get around and they are so ready to relax those social distancing, you know, guidelines. We've seen a big uptrend that correlates very closely to spring sports at the schools. And I know the weather's getting really nice, and I would just encourage people to wait a little bit longer until they've got their shots, because they're available now and people can get them. And I think that might make a lot of healthcare professionals' lives easier, and that would be the best gift we could possibly give, I think, to a lot of those working in the hospitals. And Ms. Rosky, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what some of my friends in the healthcare profession have told me. And I thought that that might be a very salient message to some people who can do something aside from confetti. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Anyone else under communications from citizens? If not, I'll close that portion and go on to reports from city administration. Mr. Vanderpool, anything
Mayor,
tonight?
Mayor, I can just say quickly, there was a question about house lights. Our ordinance restricts foot candles spilling into other properties. So when we have those cases, we deal with those on a one-on-one basis. We do have a police pursuit policy. It often results in pursuits being called off. There are a number of factors that are weighed in when considering those type of situations. The county does control our lights. Drones are deployed by many police agencies in high-speed chases. And I'll close by saying the City Council just recently, with your resolution that was approved, condemned hatred against any and all groups in the city. So that has already been done by the City Council. And that is all. Thank you.
Mr. Koszubski?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have one item for closed session tonight.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Koszubski. Council, I'll open it up for any reports or new business.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Radke.
Just briefly, I happened to be reading the Free Press the other day, and they reported on some social drinking districts that have been approved in other communities and the success that they've had. And without objection, I'd ask that, through the chair, that the city administration might examine that issue and see if maybe we could institute a social drinking district in Dodge Park to coincide with Patios and Pines. I think you need to have 2 licensees, but I'm not familiar with the law, so if they could give us a report on that, I really appreciate that.
Council, any objection? No objection.
Well, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Radke. Anyone else, Council? Mrs. Konsky.
Mr. Mayor, question for you. Somebody told me tomorrow's your birthday. Is that true?
I haven't checked lately, but I believe that is true.
I would like to say happy birthday. Enjoy your day.
Well, some days, some years I get lucky enough to have this budget hearing on my birthday. This year I wasn't that lucky.
I like my birthday party better.
Yeah, I do too. We get to sing to you. Well, last year it was on Zoom. It was a Zoom call we had last year. We had a Tuesday council meeting in May on Zoom, and yeah, that was fun. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kosky.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Council, anyone else? I want to bring up something and ask the city administration. So the topic of the American Rescue Plan came up, which is what is probably going to be providing the city with around $20 million in funding. And there was a U.S. Conference of Mayors, all mayors call yesterday, where mayors from around the country were talking about what their programs are and what their plans are. For example, Mayor Duggan in Detroit has $880 million to spend, which is just an absolutely enormous amount of money. So for them, they're going to have a real challenge figuring out what to do with that. Our more modest $20 million still is going to be something that I think we can do a lot of good for the residents, for the business owners, and certainly to plug some holes in our budget related to lost revenue. My understanding is that there's 4 categories of spending that they're still fleshing out, which is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and the negative economic impacts, premium pay to public employees, covering lost revenue, and then water, sewer, and broadband. So I'm curious about that water, sewer, and I'm really curious about all 4. But here's what I'd like to know is the city developing plans? We said at one of the budget hearings that we're developing a public input plan. Can you give us any more information on what that might look like? And what does the city administration have anything in mind for engaging the public? I'm thinking, having public engagement forums where the residents come out and say, or business owners can come out and say, explain how the pandemic has impacted them and what we can do with this $20 million. Has there been any thought given to that yet? Mr. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be happy to respond. First, yes, water and sewer infrastructure is a big need in the community. Undoubtedly, we'll look forward to using some of the $20 million for that. Broadband is another issue that we're deeply interested in. We want to get full internet service in Dodge Park, for example, and other parts, but especially Dodge Park. But more importantly, we want to close the digital divide that exists in the community. We're currently working with SEMCOG to come up with a broadband plan for the city and better identify that digital divide to be able to incorporate into the ARP plan. Undoubtedly, we do have to have a public engagement process, but we need to understand the rules more specifically before we can actually convene kind of in these focus groups or town hall settings and explaining to people what, asking them what categories they would like us to focus on when we don't know exactly what the rules are yet. But we do have these broad categories. We do know that we'll be able to provide greater assistance to businesses who desperately, especially restaurants, bars, pubs, entertainment venues and so on. We know they need help. We'll be able to do that with the $20 million. But I think we most definitely need to better understand the fine details of the rules. And then we will put forth an action plan for City Council to consider with these ideas better outlined, and then the actual public engagement process as well.
Okay, that's a good plan. The date that was thrown around on this call was May 11th, that they were thinking that there would be, May 11th would potentially be when the money would hit our account and when those guidelines would be released. But I don't know that that's set in stone yet. So thank you for that, Mr. Vanderpool, and thank you to everybody who participated. I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Ms. Riska, can we have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Yarko?
Yes.
Mrs. Koski?
Yes.
Mr. Radke?
Yes.
Mrs. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Sarowski?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Yanez?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. We will adjourn into closed session. We will not be returning. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and participating. This meeting is adjourned.